could that be?
Just doesn't figure, Harry.
Now stay tuned for an NBC White Paper report facing up to the bomb next.
Living next door to one of the major bases in the nation, surrounded by nuclear missiles, it's a daily awareness of the insanity of mankind. I've seen B-52s leaving that runway, one right on top of the other, just pushing for all they've got. And you've got to sit there and wonder, how many minutes have you got left? 10 minutes, 15? You look down to the northeast to a school that my granddad built in '89, and it's where your kids are riding their ponies to school, and you wonder, is that the last I will see of them? I hope I live to see the day, and I will work for it, that Russian people, United States people, are openly discussing how they can make this world a better world without war, without arms, without confrontations. I don't trust those guys up there to make my decisions. And far too long, we've allowed them to make those decisions.
The guys up there that Marvin Kammerer, South Dakota rancher, is talking about are the nuclear strategists.
I will not allow my grandchildren, my children, to have to live with the yoke of fear that the nuclear arms race is bringing to us.
In Rapid City, away from the air base, there is still a sense of danger, a sense that no place is safe from nuclear bombs.
We have to try to find a way to come to a solution, you know, and that is not by building more of them.
I don't think we intend to use nuclear weapons. I don't think Russia intends to use them. I don't think any country is that crazy.
Are you sure, Jack?
I'm willing to negotiate, but if they don't cooperate, then I've got to agree with President Reagan. We have got to keep producing arms.
History tells us, as we look all back through human history, that weapons that are built get used.
NBC News presents Facing Up to the Bomb. Reported by John Hart. This NBC White Paper is sponsored by Xerox Corporation.
Information, it's everywhere, in infinite variety. At Xerox, we help bring people information in all its forms, including this one. We hope you find tonight's presentation informative.
In the world today, there are about 50,000 nuclear bombs. Experts call them warheads, or weapons, or re-entry vehicles. But because they all do what bombs do, that's what we'll call them. What 50,000 of them mean in death and destruction cannot begin to be grasped, even by experts. So, in their expert studies, they generally talk about one bomb, what it would do to one city that is a likely target. In total war, any city is a likely target if it has factories or skilled workers that might help the country recover, even cities of 10,000 people. The rings on this city map indicate the stages of death and destruction moving outward from ground zero. They are based on information from the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment and from medical experts. We're talking about one bomb of a common Soviet size, 1 megaton, 80 times more powerful than the one at Hiroshima, going off 1.5 miles above the ground. This city is Chicago. Ground zero is the intersection of Cicero Avenue and the Eisenhower Expressway, near an industrial area, a likely target. As we talk about Chicago, you will probably think of a ground zero in your community and your distance from it. When the bomb goes off, everything inside this first circle, everything and everyone within 0.8 of a mile from ground zero, will be gone. Steel will vaporize. 3 miles away, most commercial buildings will collapse. Homes, even brick homes, will become scattered pieces of debris. So will people. 4.4 miles from ground zero, there is, some experts say, a 50-50 chance of surviving the first few seconds. No time to reach Oak Park Hospital or Cook County Hospital should they survive the double hurricane winds of 160 miles an hour or the firestorm that is likely. Even before a firestorm, anyone caught out in the open will get third-degree burns. That's when the skin turns to charcoal. In the entire United States, there are facilities for treating about 2,000 severely burned people. One bomb can produce 10,000. 5.9 miles away, the walls of a typical steel frame building will be blown away. People will die under these former walls, or from flying pieces of them, or from becoming flying pieces themselves. Windows will become thousands of shards of glass traveling 80 to 90 miles an hour. 11.6 miles away, the initial danger is from flying debris and second-degree burns. If you were at O'Hare Airport or the University of Chicago or Wrigley Field, you'd have about a minute to look for refuge from the blast. The blast travels 1 mile every 5 seconds. The burning flash at the speed of light. Within this outer ring, 23 miles across, the estimates are that 1.5 million people would die immediately. Another 750,000 later. We haven't mentioned death from panic, or 750,000 left injured, or the effects of radiation in the weeks, the years to come. We have talked about the first minute of a single 1 megaton bomb. In a war, Chicago would surely receive many bombs. For the country, the experts think of thousands of bombs aimed at our missiles alone. When you add other military installations and industries, you think of thousands of additional bombs on some 400 high-risk areas where millions of people live. In the Soviet Union, the missile fields are fairly remote from the cities, but other military targets and most of their industry are where the Soviet people live. Tonight, we will examine 3 questions. How did we get into this? Where do we stand now? And what can be done? The nuclear arms race began not against Russia, but against Germany in World War II, a race to get the bomb first. On a summer day in 1945 in New Mexico, we won. As the sun came up over the desert, there was no bomb, only a 5-ton globe called a device. By this time, Germany had already surrendered. They would not get the bomb, and some Americans working on ours thought we should stop. We didn't. Plutonium for the device arrived hand-carried in a military sedan. The scientists weren't positive it would work, or exactly how powerful it might be. Some made bets. The ones who bet it would be as big as 20,000 tons of TNT won. The scientist in charge, J. Robert Oppenheimer, felt nobody had won.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
The Allied leaders were in a meeting at Potsdam when President Truman got the message. He kept the secret from Stalin, casually mentioning a new, extremely destructive weapon. Stalin was casual. He knew what it was. He had his own atomic project. 2 weeks after Potsdam, a B-29 hollowed out to take a 5-ton bomb was loaded on a Pacific island. Japan, losing badly, still had not surrendered. The world arsenal was 4 atomic bombs, all ours. 2 Japanese cities would get 1 each. The cities could have been completely destroyed by waves of conventional bombing, the kind that had already turned Dresden, Germany into a firestorm. What was new, although we didn't grasp its meaning then, was that this could now be done instantly. We didn't photograph the Hiroshima bomb. We did at Nagasaki. Most of us thought this was to end World War II.
We felt that maybe this weapon was so strong that it would deter aggression in future, and the world would be made safe for democracy, or safe.
Ernest May of Harvard, a specialist on the arms race, has written a still secret history of it for the Secretary of Defense.
The idea that anybody anywhere could be afraid of the United States was something that only very slowly entered the minds of Americans. We assumed that we were Galahad.
The surrender of Japan left the world at peace and left the United States with its new discovery and intense curiosity about it. There was no arms race as we tested atomic devices in the South Pacific to see what it was we really had. Our bombs were big and clumsy. Airplanes had to be rebuilt to carry them, and we thought there wasn't much plutonium in the world. We figured the Russians wouldn't get one for years. In 1946, we had 9 bombs. Then things began to happen that led us to believe we might want a nuclear arsenal. The war was over, but the Soviet Union kept building its armies. The communist parties in France and Italy set off a series of riots, apparently aiming to overthrow governments in Western Europe. Soviet armies helped communists take over Eastern Europe without the free elections Stalin had promised. Soviet historian Roy Medvedev is a specialist on Soviet-American relations and known in the West as a leading Russian dissident.
It would be naive to think that Stalin established or promoted the establishment in Eastern Europe of regimes that would resemble Western-type ones. He could establish only the type which most resembled Stalinist terrorist regimes, as in the Soviet Union itself.
The Soviets cut off West Berlin with the blockade, appearing determined to take the city away from its wartime allies. We kept West Berlin alive with a continuous airlift of supplies. But we were alarmed and formed our own alliance, NATO. We stationed B-29s capable of carrying atom bombs in Britain, an implicit warning to Russia. By the time the Soviets lifted the blockade, we knew we were in a Cold War, but not even then in a nuclear arms race.
Our action in response to what we saw Stalin doing was essentially political and economic. We put money and $17 billion into the Marshall Plan, support for Christian democratic parties in Europe, that sort of thing. But it was not a military response. We were at the same time pushing our military spending far down. Mr. Truman hoped to get it back to the level of the 30s, and he was getting there fast. But the Soviet response was a military response.
At that time, the Soviet Union likewise was very apprehensive toward America, because the Cold War began in 1946, continued through 1947, expanded in 1948. And so if America viewed the Soviet Union as a country bent on expansionism, then the Soviet Union also regarded America as a country bent on expansionism.
Up to this point in the Cold War, the United States still knew that if it came down to it, we could use the bomb. What we could not predict was the series of shocks that became the nuclear arms race.
For some people, the words laser beams conjure up images of distant galaxies in outer space. But Xerox scientists saw the laser as a ray of hope for increasing productivity and introduced it into the office. Today, Xerox lasers help make Xerox electronic printers the most advanced information output systems available. They take information from computers and word processors and print it out at incredible speeds. Other Xerox scientists are using laser and electronic technology to develop data entry machines that help computers speed read. They actually translate printed words into computer language 12 times faster than manual methods. While still other Xerox scientists are using laser and optical technologies to bring back images from spaceships like Voyagers 1 and 2. Xerox technology, it's helping increase productivity in offices all over the world and beyond.
Today, hundreds of companies make machines to increase office productivity. Some make electronic typewriters or personal computers, or word processors and workstations. Some make small copiers or facsimile units, large duplicators or electronic printers. The list goes on and on. But only one company offers you all these machines, and a machine that can show them all to you on a copy this large, Xerox.
The first shock of the nuclear Cold War came when a B-29 patrolling the North Pacific picked up radioactive dust, Russian dust. The American monopoly was gone. The race was on. Within months of the Soviet bomb, Korea.
This attack has made it clear beyond all doubt that the international communist movement is willing to use armed invasion to conquer independent nations.
The invasion of South Korea by North Korea, backed up by China, seemed proof that the communist monolith was willing to run risks in the nuclear age. America's response was to triple its defense budget. American troops were sent to Europe. We built the B-47, a jet plane made for carrying atom bombs. We developed the hydrogen bomb. There is an inherent limit to the power of atom bombs. There is no limit to the power of H-bombs. Within 10 months, the Soviets had the H-bomb.
The Soviet Union did not want to fall behind America in the sphere of armaments, including atomic weapons. This was a totally natural reaction on the part of a great power to the new weaponry which had appeared in the hands of a potential adversary, the United States of America.
The problem really stems from the combination of things. It was not just the Soviet test. It was the Soviet test in conjunction with the takeover of Czechoslovakia, the Berlin blockade, and finally Korea, accompanied by this evidence of military buildup.
On May Day, 1954, 5 years after the Soviets acquired the bomb, we discovered they could now deliver it against the United States. We saw for the first time a Soviet intercontinental bomber. For the first time, we were vulnerable to atomic attack. Now there was a public uproar about a bomber gap, which turned out later to be in our favor, 5-1 over the Soviets. Still, we were exposed. Up went a network of radar warning stations.
To all intents and purposes, enemy bombers or missiles were on their way toward New York City.
Out came the first plan for civil defense against nuclear attack.
30,000 police and firemen, as well as units of the U.S. Air Force, all took part.
The second shock was Sputnik in 1957, the Soviets proving they had a missile big enough and good enough to put a satellite into orbit before we did. The nuclear contest was changed. While we had been worrying about a bomber gap that did not exist, the Soviets had already decided on a crash program for missiles. And now, our own missile program had serious competition. Within 2 years of Sputnik, the United States had nuclear missiles in Turkey, Germany, Italy, and Britain, aimed at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union aimed missiles at Europe.
The Soviet Union created the impression, or at least tried to create the impression, that it had at its disposal approximately the same weaponry as did America. But in fact, this was not the case. America was far ahead of the Soviet Union, and therefore the Soviet Union's desire to match the American strategic arsenal was only natural.
When the Soviets shot down an American spy plane in 1960 and showed off the wreckage of the U-2, it didn't affect the arms race itself, but it revealed a strong Soviet motivation in the nuclear race. Historian Medvedev says the U-2 seemed a contemptuous expression of American technological superiority.
Both in 1960 and at present, constant violations of another country's airspace are a crude violation of international law, a type of aggression. Soviet airplanes were not flying over America, and if they had, then America certainly would not have looked very favorably upon such behavior.
Nikita Khrushchev wrote of the U-2, "They were making these flights to show up our impotence." Soviet fear of being discovered as impotent may have led Khrushchev to put missiles into Cuba. It was the U-2 that discovered the Soviet plan to put missiles in Cuba, missiles that could destroy our bomber bases and our cities. These preparations were our third shock. The Soviets seemed to be saying, "You'll find out what it feels like for us to be facing your missiles in Europe." The difference was we believed our president would not fire our missiles first. We didn't know that about the Soviets.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
In this crisis, all the scenarios of graduated escalation were forgotten. Both sides assumed a quick leap to total war. The Soviets backed down, and with an American promise not to invade Cuba, Khrushchev called his missiles home.
It was an attempt to create balance between the strategic capabilities of the two superpowers. It represented the creation of a capability to inflict upon America the same strong blow which America was already capable of inflicting upon the Soviet Union.
It was an understandable action. It's the thing that I think made a crisis out of it was not the deployment of missiles to Cuba, but was the way in which it was done. It was the secrecy in which it was done and the fact that the Soviet government lied to the President of the United States.
At this point, 17 years into the nuclear age, the United States still owned most of the world's arsenal. In intercontinental missiles, we had 7 times as many as the Soviets. In intercontinental bombers, nearly 11 times as many as they. In submarine-launched missiles, we had 5 times as many. The first arms agreement of the nuclear age came a year after the Cuban crisis. It stopped all tests of nuclear bombs above the ground. The tests in the air had been putting radioactivity into our food. The treaty stopped that. Underground tests were allowed, but because the blast of big bombs could not be contained underground, there was now a practical limit to the size of weapons. The treaty was successful. Both sides have honored it. It did not stop the arms race. The Cuban Missile Crisis had left the United States relieved and the Soviet Union humiliated. In the years following, the Soviets began making and testing missiles as fast as they could. The United States ordered up what is our present 3-part defense. New submarines, the Polaris. New airplanes, the FB-111s. And modernized B-52s. And better intercontinental missiles. After that, we figured both sides had enough to destroy each other and deter war. We figured 1,000 ground-based missiles were enough for us. But by the end of the 60s, it was clear the Soviets had gone on building missiles and had more than we. By 1972, 10 years after Cuba, The strategic balance had changed. The Soviets far outnumbered us in intercontinental missiles. We still had the advantage in bombers and submarine-launched missiles, but they were catching up. The mix appeared to leave each side as vulnerable to destruction as the other. And since vulnerable people don't normally attack first, that was deterrence, mutual assured destruction. To try and preserve this parity, the first Strategic Arms Treaty, SALT I, put a limit on missile launchers, but let the arms race continue in other ways. The United States, for example, found a way to make one missile do the work of three by putting 3 bombs on it, each bomb aimed at a different target, MIRV, for Multiple Independently Targeted Re-Entry Vehicle.
It was thought of on the American side as being a response to the surprising level of, an unexpected level of Soviet missile deployments at the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s. It was probably a mistake to have gone to MIRV, but it's an understandable one, and it was a public one.
The Soviets kept making their missiles bigger, so when they MIRVed, they could put 10 bombs on a missile.
The Soviet Union once again wanted to match America's strategic arsenal. Hence, it created new weapons, which of course represented a danger to America. But America already had weapons which were more dangerous for the Soviet Union.
The SALT II Treaty was signed in 1979 to try again for stability in the arms race. But the U.S. Senate was not eager to ratify it, some saying it was better than nothing, others saying it was worse than nothing. And when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, President Carter just told the Senate to drop SALT II. Nevertheless, both sides have been quietly abiding by SALT II, except for the part that would have made the Soviets cut back the big missiles by 10%. So far, we've covered the 37 years of the nuclear age to show how we got to where we are now when we come back.
In today's offices, managers and professionals are expected to earn their salaries with tools that haven't changed much since the 1800s, like the ballpoint pen, the pencil and eraser, and the typewriter. No wonder productivity is behind the times. But Xerox can help with flexible information systems that simplify word and data processing and print and distribute information at record speeds, which can put you a century ahead of where you were yesterday.
If you want a typewriter that erases, you can get the correcting Selectric or the Xerox Memory Writer. If you want one that erases and sets columns automatically, you can get their Model 50 or the Xerox Memory Writer. If you want one that also has a memory for paragraphs, you can get their Model 60 or the Xerox Memory Writer. But if you want one that erases 2 lines automatically and has about 30% more memory for under $1,360, you can only get the Xerox 610 Memory Writer.
Door. At Xerox, we make copiers that do things no other copiers can do. There's one that automatically copies 2-sided originals. Another one makes the finest quality copies. And another one does more jobs faster than any machine available. What has all this gotten us?
Yes, I'm selling Delmatic copiers.
No, thank you.
Absolutely faithful customers.
The main switches to the American half of the world's nuclear arsenal are on a small console that fits into a briefcase that is carried by a military officer who is always a few steps away from the president. What this briefcase represents is inconceivable. We deal with what we cannot face by giving it a familiar name. Since the briefcase must not be dropped, it is called the football. We don't know where the Kremlin's switches are, but we assume that they have a master control device too, for their half of the world's nuclear arsenal. What is the arsenal now? About 50,000 bombs. Who has how many of them? It's not exactly clear. The strategic bombs, the ones we have aimed at each other's homelands, are 1/3 of the total, 17,000 between us. The rest are for shorter ranges between Europe and the USSR. or within a battlefield, or between the USSR and China, theater weapons. Britain, France, and China have a few hundred bombs among them, and we suspect some other countries have at least one: Israel, South Africa, India. Between the United States and the Soviet Union, the strategic bombs are divided about equally, roughly 9,000 ready for firing by the United States, 8,100 by the Soviet Union. But the arms race is not just between two piles of bombs. The main race is over how to deliver them. The big missiles can carry more than one bomb, each to a different target, so America's 1,000 or so land missiles have 2,150 bombs. The Soviets' 1,400 missiles carry 5,500 bombs. We outnumber them underwater. 5,300 bombs on our submarine missiles, 1,900 on theirs. That leaves about 1,500 for our intercontinental airplanes, 700 for theirs. You can see that we are ahead in some ways, and they in others. And you can see why there is an argument over who has the edge.
On balance, the Soviet Union does have a definite margin of superiority.
Just because they happen to have more ICBMs and bigger ICBMs, that doesn't mean they have a superiority, because we basically are superior to them in our strategic forces, because we have much more survivable forces.
The main distinction between deterrence and a first strike capacity is numbers. And they have an enormous lead in the most destructive weapons.
Both sides can respond to the other's strike and always have been, well, have been able to for a long time.
The United States deterrent strategy is the be-all and end-all of our nuclear arsenal. This is not a panoply of weapons that we develop with some specific political goal in mind other than deterrence. That's it. It's to prevent their use.
Deterrence has been the main idea since the 1960s. But in the last few years, there's been a shift in thinking toward actually fighting a nuclear war. If you can convince the other side you are willing to use nuclear weapons in a war, that might deter them even more. On their side, the doctrine has been, if it comes to war, go for victory. Their way of deterring us more. Another form of deterrence is coming to your hometown, civil defense. The idea being, if the United States can demonstrate it is preparing for the worst, that will help the Soviets hesitate. This is Moore, Oklahoma, which is sure it's a target because a big airbase is right next door. The subject in the 6th grade is a federal plan for survival.
Okay, Larry, what 3 items would you take to the fallout shelter with you to benefit your group?
Food and clothing, and one of us has first aid kits.
And weapons and ammunition for the weapons.
Why do you think you should take weapons with you? Paul?
Because everyone would be fighting over space in the bomb shelters, and we might need them to protect ourselves.
The government curriculum says nothing about weapons. It concentrates on evacuation.
It's just going to be a big jam and bumper-to-bumper cars all over, and they probably just wouldn't be any way to get out of it.
Eric?
It'd be pretty scary because everything will be flattened and there won't be nothing left, and if you did survive, there wouldn't be nothing to eat. Or.
Do you think you would have a chance of surviving? Not at all?
Eric's fears are shared by the Philadelphia City Council, one of 24 cities and counties that have rejected a civil defense plan.
As Commissioner of Health, I come here to tell you, to state loudly and clearly, to state loudly and directly, that there is no way, no plan, no gimmick, no illusions about protecting health during a nuclear war. It cannot be done.
In Seattle, the evacuation plan divides the 1.2 million people into 52 sectors, which will move out in stages to 28 host counties, 250 miles from Puget Sound. The assumption is there will be 3 days warning because crises tend to escalate over a period of days, or, as in the Falkland Islands, even weeks. Time for relocation.
There's no guarantee we will have the 72 hours. But there is also no guarantee that we will have an attack without the 72 hours.
In Seattle, the planners had difficulty convincing the public.
With all your resources and your high influence, can't you please tell the officials in Washington that we don't want this insanity?
President Reagan's request for $4 billion for civil defense is having a hard time in Congress.
This program, then, could enable survival of roughly 80% of the United States population in a heavy attack. You believe that?
Yes, it would double the number of survivors.
You realize that our witnesses, our expert witnesses, don't believe it for a second.
I feel like relocation is the appropriate alternative to staying in that risk area.
The Soviet Union has shelters for over 100,000 of the country's leadership. It has relocation plans for the population and compulsory civil defense classes. There is something of an argument in this country now over a civil defense gap. In 1978, the CIA concluded that with their civil defense, the Soviets could not prevent massive damage to their economy and the destruction of many of their most valued material accomplishments. This March, senators were briefed again by the CIA and came out saying nothing significant had changed. In New York, we asked some recent Russian immigrants about civil defense exercises in the Soviet Union.
I would say that the officer, the teacher of this class, he was really serious about it. He really believed in it. We laughed at him, but he really believed in everything that he was saying to us.
If it's happened in school, you would probably go to the basement.
No one seems to take it seriously.
Everybody knows if, in case of nuclear attack, wherever you go, nuclear weapon will get you anywhere.
It's hard to find anyone in the American government who is really afraid that any day now Soviet bombs may suddenly rain down on us.
The idea of a Soviet nuclear first strike appears highly implausible. It may or might appear somewhat less implausible if it's put into a broader context. Say a crisis that broke out between the United States and the Soviet Union, say over the Persian Gulf oil fields that escalated, or a major conventional conflict that took place in Europe.
Europe has always been seen as the tripwire. That's where the armies of East and West face each other. That's where the West has felt outgunned by the larger Soviet forces since World War II. The West was unwilling to spend the money to raise an equal army, so the United States gave Europe the protection of our nuclear threat and moved nuclear weapons to Europe. The Soviet answer was to threaten Europe with its own nuclear missiles, the latest, the SS-20, 300 of them. West Germany's Chancellor Schmidt, speaking for NATO, told President Brezhnev these new missiles threaten Europe and upset the military balance there.
Now, the SS-20 threatens Europe and not the United States. It can't reach to the United States. The Europeans have become obsessed with this as a special threat to them. I think that's silly. The missiles that the Soviets have, which could strike the United States, can clearly strike Europe.
Feeling outgunned again, NATO has ordered up an improved Pershing missile, which goes farther faster, and cruise missiles, hard to find and very accurate. New weapons scheduled to be in Europe in the next couple of years. That prospect frightens the Soviets. The SS-20s frighten NATO. So the United States and the Soviet Union have been negotiating these theater weapons for more than 6 months. Many Europeans say the West should stop arming whatever the Soviets do, because every new missile in Europe becomes a new target. Europeans are not sure we would risk our homeland in defense of theirs. So, leaders like Chancellor Schmidt want matching missiles in Europe, and the marchers don't want any missiles there at all. Most Americans don't want missiles either, but figure that the practical thing is not to disarm on our own, but have both sides stop arming. In one opinion survey, 83% of the American people said the Soviet Union and the United States should freeze the arms race right where it is.
Be it resolved that the town of Salisbury endorses the following proposal for a mutual U.S.-Soviet nuclear weapon free.
A town meeting in Salisbury, Connecticut.
I'm not sure that saying stop it to the Russians is going to stop them.
The Russian people have absolutely no say in what the government does. The Russian dictum is rule by force.
We're tired of being frightened. We're tired of having the rattle of missiles down the road. And so, we, the uninformed, we, the naive, we that nobody listens to very much, have finally said, we're sick of it. Stop it. We've had enough.
All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by raising your right hand.
More than 500 cities and counties have called for a freeze. So have the legislatures of 8 states, and so have 1/3 of the members of Congress. Where we are now is a growing mass of Americans demanding both sides stop the arms race where it is, and breathing down the neck of a president who insists on negotiating a reduction first, while making new weapons to encourage the Soviets to agree. We'll examine these two positions next.
May I have your attention, please? The resolution is carried by a vote of 276 in favor, 45 against.
Each day, business pours millions of words and numbers into office machines. Unfortunately, ways of getting information out haven't kept up. So to free information, Xerox invented electronic printers. Printers that can take stored information and using laser technology give you letter-perfect letter-sized pages at the amazing speed of up to 120 pages per minute. Xerox printers that not only let you create and store forms electronically, but also print the form and what goes on the form all at the same time. Xerox printers let you choose from hundreds of different typefaces and even merge graphics with your text. So Xerox electronic printers can help you free information and get it where it belongs, into the hands of people.
Brother Dominic, if we had another 200 pounds of wax, how many more candles?
13,003 annually.
And if we cleared another acre for our grapevines, how much more wine do you think?
633 bottles.
A simply amazing machine.
It's the Xerox personal computer.
How much did it cost? Another miracle.
The Xerox 820 personal computer.
When there's danger and Americans feel helpless, they gather together, light candles, sing songs, and start a movement demanding a change.
We are duty-bound to articulate the growing concern of an increasing number of our fellow citizens that nuclear arms and their use exceed the limits of legitimate self-defense.
An enormous movement is collected around a simple idea: freeze the arms race. The movement calls for both sides to stop testing, producing, and putting in the field any more nuclear weapons. In 3 states, a flood of petitions has put the freeze proposal on November ballots to provide another clear signal of public sentiment.
What do we want? When do we want it?
The idea of a mutual freeze cuts across every division in America: liberals and conservatives, workers and professionals, Democrats and Republicans. There are 2 opposing resolutions in Congress with Republicans and Democrats on both sides. One is the movement's call for a mutual freeze now. The other to rearm, then negotiate reductions, then freeze, the president's plan. And the freeze debate is joined by nuclear strategists.
At the present time, there's no chance that either side could ever calculate that it could gain by starting a nuclear war.
Paul Warnke was chief negotiator for SALT II.
It's sometimes referred to, as you know, as the balance of terror, but it exists. So that if we could, in fact, freeze everything right now, it would certainly be in our interests.
It would do nothing to protect our submarine systems, but it would permit the Soviets to go on building anti-submarine warfare capabilities, which could raise questions about the survivability of our sea-based deterrent. It would do nothing to protect our B-52 bombers, but it would prevent us from modernizing those bombers so that we would have a bomber force that could survive Soviet attack. And at the same time, it would permit the Soviets to go on building air defenses.
One of the problems we're seeing today is this whole business of qualitative improvements, modernization of missile systems, which make them more effective as nuclear warfighting missiles and make nuclear war more likely. One way to stop that development is to freeze where we are today.
Our goal is to enhance deterrence and achieve stability through significant reductions in the most destabilizing nuclear systems, ballistic missiles, and especially the giant intercontinental ballistic missiles.
The president proposed negotiation with the Soviet Union.
I expect ballistic missile warheads, the most serious threat we face, to be reduced to equal levels, equal ceilings, at least a third below the current levels.
Ballistic missile warheads, bombs, a limit on the number of bombs. This is a radical departure from previous agreements which dealt with methods of delivery, but left out the number of bombs. The president is aiming at a balance of the 2 arsenals. There are several kinds of imbalance. The Soviets have 70% of their bombs on land-based missiles. Only 25% of ours are land-launched. The president wants the limit to be 50%, which would cut the Soviets down and leave room for us to increase. Their submarines carry only 24% of their strategic arsenal. American submarines carry 60% of ours. So if the Soviets make reductions on land, we'd make reductions at sea. In the air, the Soviets have roughly 6% of their arsenal for bombers, and we about 15%. The bomber imbalance is not in the president's offer, but the White House says everything is negotiable, with no preconditions.
Yes, at the strategic level, everything is on the table.
The Brezhnev response was to welcome negotiations on reductions, to call the president's proposal one-sided, and to suggest a freeze before talking. Significantly, neither side made demands, only proposals. Brezhnev, for example, suggesting negotiators build on past agreements. That meant SALT II, which Reagan had long rejected. But on May 31st, the president made a significant gesture.
As for existing strategic arms agreements, we will refrain from actions which undercut them so long as the Soviet Union shows equal restraint.
Negotiations seem to be underway, even before the talks begin. How much influence has the movement had on the president? It's hard to know. It's clear he has been moved to respond.
To those who protest against nuclear war, I can only say, I'm with you.
The movement's greatest impact may have been to bring home to the president the need for public support. Among the guidelines for fashioning his arms reduction plan were that it must deserve public support and be understandable to the American people. People don't understand throw weight as easily as numbers of bombs. The president chose to start negotiation on the numbers of bombs. One of the incentives for both sides to negotiate quickly is the increasing danger of hair-trigger reactions to the new generation of weapons. When the Soviets' bigger and more accurate missiles threaten our silos, a president may be tempted to empty those silos on the first warning of attack, to use them so as not to lose them. The Soviets may face the same predicament if our new Pershing II missiles are stationed in Europe. 5 to 7 minutes flight time from targets in the Soviet Union.
Obviously, Chairman Brezhnev and the Politburo can't assemble to make a decision about a 6-minute warning. So what that means is that if we do deploy those weapons in Germany, then we will really have put the Soviets in a perilous spot, and we'll have forced them into what is called launch-on warning. You're really taking the risk of having computers decide whether or not we go to war.
Of course it bothers them, but that means it's a good leverage in our hand. It's a good tool. And it's a good way to force them to come to the negotiating table and do something meaningful, because to get rid of those Pershings, they're going to have to give up something that bothers us.
The middle-sized missiles, Pershing IIs and SS-20s, are in a separate negotiation already going on in Geneva, the theater talks. The long-range bombs will be in the new negotiations starting the 29th of this month in Geneva, strategic talks, and the two negotiations will be closely coordinated. The danger of a bomb is not in the bomb. It's in the head of whoever owns it. And since the Soviets and the Americans see the world differently, the arms race is really an extension of our differences. How the talks proceed depends to a large extent on how they see us and how we see them.
It's the coupling of Soviet ideology, which tends to be expansionist, with a Soviet history, which is one of being threatened, that leads to a fairly aggressive policy.
As far as Soviet officials are concerned, I can assure you that they, of course, regard America with the amount of respect which America deserves as a superpower, with its corresponding might, power, culture, technological level. But Soviet officials also are very apprehensive toward America. And those phrases about American imperialism wanting to impose its will upon the entire world are not simply propaganda. Many Soviet leaders and officials believe this, believe that America truly does have such intentions.
We can't take opinion polls in the Soviet Union, and Soviet leaders don't share their innermost thoughts. But there is a fascinating study by the U.S. Communications Agency on Soviet attitudes. It found they don't see us as we see ourselves. It's difficult for them to understand, says this study, how our country with so many economic and political centers can work as we say it does. They look for clues to some secret control center in America. They find it hard to believe we see them as a real threat, seeing their own foreign policy as defensive in a hostile world, hostility they remember from wars against their own land. And they are afraid that America, undamaged by war at home, might be tempted to attack. They feel we take pleasure in their shortcomings, are unwilling to recognize a legitimate place for them in the world, are reluctant to see them as equal. The study reflects the feelings of middle-level officials in the Soviet Union as revealed in private conversations over the years to Americans. The study shows that the Soviet experts think they understand us. They will bring that attitude to the nuclear negotiations, and we will bring ours. There is a crucial difference between the two sides. The Soviets order arms in secret, and we must learn about them years later when the weapons appear. So we imagine the worst that they might be planning and leap ahead to develop arms. We order weapons in public, in hearings, in the federal budget. But the Soviets have seen us change those orders so often that they, too, imagine the worst that we might do and plan for it. We preparing for the unknown, they for the unpredictable, each side reacting to what the other can do. What they intend to do is what matters. That means working on the relationship.
For some people, the words laser beams conjure up images of distant galaxies in outer space. But Xerox scientists saw the laser as a ray of hope for increasing productivity and introduced it into the office. Today, Xerox lasers help make Xerox electronic printers the most advanced information output systems available. They take information from computers and word processors and print it out at incredible speeds. Other Xerox scientists are using laser and electronic technology to develop data entry machines that help computers speed read. They actually translate printed words into computer language 12 times faster than manual methods. While still other Xerox scientists are using laser and optical technologies to bring back images from spaceships like Voyagers 1 and 2. Xerox technology. It's helping increase productivity in offices all over the world and beyond.
I've set up lots of fast breaks in my day, but watch this one for Xerox. Buy this compact copier and get a $600 discount. Or get low financing on this one that reduces. Or on this one that handles documents automatically. And you get hundreds of dollars of free paper and supplies. Call toll-free 800-648-5888. But hustle. I wouldn't be setting up these fast breaks if Xerox didn't want you to score.
In this broadcast, we have tried to give you the wherewithal to understand the nuclear world. We've shown you schemes versus schemes, weapons versus weapons. In a war, of course, weapons will not be the victims. The weapons in the schemes are supposed to prevent the other alternative, an uncontrolled arms race, a race to war. We are all trying to keep the final scene from ending, as it did in Hamlet, where the witness to killings, Horatio, stands among the bodies and says, "You shall hear of carnal, bloody, and unnatural acts, of accidental judgments, casual slaughters, and in this upshot, purposes mistook, fallen on the inventors' heads." Good night for NBC News.
This NBC White Paper was sponsored by Xerox Corporation.
Information. It's everywhere, in infinite variety. At Xerox, we help bring people information in all its forms, including this one. We hope you found tonight's presentation informative.
There's something for everyone at the circus on June 22nd and 23rd. You'll see everything from the world-renowned animal trainer Gunther Gebel-Williams to the first family of the year, the Flying Farfins. It's all at the Municipal Auditorium during Channel 4's family matinees at Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. Channel 4 matinee tickets are $2 off the regular price for performances at 2:30 each day. So come to the circus with Channel 4.
Later on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, Johnny welcomes actress Diane Cannon. Then for outrageous fun, stay tuned for the best of SCTV Network. Tomorrow, don't miss NBC's live coverage of the Major League Baseball Game of the Week. Consult local listings for the game in your area. Sunday afternoon, catch the Howard Cooper welterweight rematch on NBC Sports World.
NBC News produced this program and is solely responsible for its content.
Coming up in just a minute on the scene at 10, the Metro budget hearings went into their final phase with department heads searching for more money. The red carpet is laid out for President Reagan upon his return from what he called a successful overseas trip. And Alan Nelson says fanfare fans in Music City are just as interesting as the stars they're here to see.
These stories and more news coming up on the scene at 10.
a free sample of our newest, one-of-a-kind Chicken McNuggets.
McNuggets, McDonald's new McNuggets. It's crispy, boneless.
It's boneless chunks of chicken served with your choice of 4 sauces.
McNuggets?
Love it. Come try a free Chicken McNugget. It's one of a kind.
Come try a free Chicken McNugget now through June 20th. Just stop by your local McDonald's between 11:30 and 1 p.m. and 5:30 and 7 p.m. Chicken McNuggets, they're one of a kind.
Sometimes a simple river crossing isn't so simple. And when you've got him back, it's your turn. Bush. Head for the beer brewed natural as a mountain stream. For a taste as smooth as its